be really important for this for today's session. Today we're joined by Andy Maddox. We're anticipating Tracy Power from the Tour de France Grand Départ, who Tracy's lead on the social value. I'll let Andy introduce himself in full detail, but Andy's here today to talk to us about game plan and the work that he's done around that, and that links with his leadership role around the Tour de Yorkshire and the UCI work that he's done as well. So as we'd normally do, bit of a presentation, questions, anything that you've got on, on our journey today, just pop that in the chat, and Andy and others will try and keep an eye on that. And Andy's very kindly sent across the presentation. I'll make sure that that's sent out to everyone, just so you've got first-hand reference to that. So Andy, welcome, and thank you for joining us all the way from Doncaster. Is it sunny out there?
It's sunny, but very cold today for some reason. Yes. But yeah, it's nice. It definitely is nice. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hi. That's great stuff. So Andy, do you want to just introduce yourself and then get your slides up? Thank you.
Yeah, will do. So I'm Andy Maddox. I'm the Strategic and Service Lead at the City of Doncaster Council for Leisure Services. And I also, we are one of the original, what was LDPs? Originally one of the 12 which placed partnerships with Sport England now. So we've been working with Sport England for 9 years, nearly 10 years now, prior to us becoming an LDP, and obviously during the place partnership work. Been very fortunate with the work we've undertaken with Sport England to have opportunities to do a number of things, but ultimately where we have delivered a lot of research and data and insight initially was around major events. And what I'll do is I'll just pull up a couple of slides just to explain the journey and where we are, and then I'll probably just chat a bit more, and then I'll open up for questions. That's okay. So the slides I'll run through fairly quickly. There's only 4 of them, so if I just share my screen. Okay, just a second.
I'm just confirming we can see that. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
That's better.
Great.
Okay. I can't see you guys now, unfortunately, but I'll just chat through. So we've got an event journey here, which is really the opener of it. How did we get to where we were in hosting major events as Doncaster? As you can see on this event journey, prior to 2012, we had no track history whatsoever. We hadn't delivered really a major event of any size. We'd had the old milk race come through Doncaster, which is now the Tour of Britain, many, many years ago. But other than that, we hadn't delivered anything, and there wasn't a real focus. What we did do in 2012, we hosted, like every other local authority, the Olympic Torch. Going back that far, we were the only authority originally to refuse the Olympic Torch. We had an independent mayor. We're a mayoral system, and he didn't want to host it, but then decided it was probably better politically that we did host it. And we did have a long footprint. We had the largest outside of London, essentially a total 15 miles. So it was actually across the whole of Doncaster for the whole day. We found something happened then around community spirit, but we weren't too sure. But at that time as well, as a local authority, we were in special measures. So we couldn't really continue our work around major events because we had to focus on other things. In 2014, when the Tour de France came to Yorkshire, every local authority signed an agreement to support the increase of cycling. And what we did there was we set up a town centre's criterium race off with the local clubs. That became one of the largest in the north of England, which only ceased in 2019 when we had the UCI road rules and then went into the pandemic, unfortunately. But in 2016, we hosted the first Tour de Yorkshire stage finish. And at that point, we thought we'd only host one. We weren't too sure how it was going to go. I'm a cyclist. I'm a keen cyclist, so I understand the racing rules of the road for cycling. And what I realise is I have no jurisdiction over the race. So anything curb to curb, road service wise, we wouldn't bother with. We do what we were told to do, but we wouldn't try and change anything there, except for maybe a bit of the route planning. What we did focus on was anything curb to hedge, curb to house, etc. So those community assets and those places. What we did in 2016 was throw everything at it, the kitchen sink. So we had the finish. We hosted a large event on the finish all day with a fan zone, cultural arts events, etc., happening on there, children's races, and a number of events along the route through the borough. And there was two key points during that day that really sort of cemented we were onto something. We needed to research it. One was slightly prior. There's a community called Conisbury. If anybody knows Doncaster, we're a borough of ex-mining villages, and one of these is called Conisbury, which has a castle in it, an Anglo-Saxon castle. And the race went round the castle. And while we were sorting things out a few days beforehand, me and the chief exec were in this village, and one little old lady came up to us and grabbed the chief exec's hands, and her words were to us, "We've not had community spirit in this village like this since the miners' strike." And that was a very powerful statement for me, for somebody to reference a miners' strike in a way that it was referencing a positive community spirit and aligning that to something we were putting on the ground. So we realized we'd done something unintentionally that had raised community spirit and that social value. And then also on the finish line, we had children racing on the finish line. This was the weekend the council had gone live that we were making £51 million worth of cuts. But what I was promised by the mayor and the chief exec as the bikes went over the finish line within about 20 minutes was we're going to build a cycle circuit for Doncaster. And I said, well, yeah, okay. They said, how much? I said, oh, about £1 million, I would think. We probably can't afford it. That was on the Saturday. I walked back into the office on the Tuesday, and I had a budget line with £750,000 in my budget to build a cycle circuit. And that sort of told me the power of sport and influencing politicians. What did that lead to? Well, after that, as you can see, our journey there in 2017, we were awarded the local delivery pilot, which allowed us to research into our future events. And we started doing that. So in 2018, we looked at maximising local benefits and research from further Tour de Yorkshires. And in 2019, we held 2 starts at the UCI Road Worlds, where we took the research further. And we also held a start of the Tour de Yorkshire in 2019. Later that year, we also had the Six Nations, Rosa Six Nations in Doncaster, and we did some more work with that. And then we tested the theories, not in Doncaster, but with Birmingham and the Commonwealth Games. So we tested some of our theories there. And then in 2022, we held the Rugby League World Cup, where we tested those theories even further and the way we worked. And that led to us to the launch of Game Plan. So if I just jump to a couple more slides. We did this with Leeds Beckett University, and we used their research and their teams there from the tourism events departments to actually look at that. So we've done this over time, and we've actually used an academic process to do that, and that's been very beneficial. And that has been able to reference a number of things in there. So that is around the theories we've used, and we use a theory called gamification and event planning framework, and they're 2 frameworks that are internationally recognised. Gamification comes from the video game industry. It's about how to make things addictive, essentially. How do games entice people to be more active? And at the same time, the event planning framework is a way of delivering events. What I would say is they're very different in style. The event planning framework is very structured and very corporate in the way you look at it. Gamification is a way of using tools to actually entice people to do things. And probably the best example of that is a thing called speed camera lottery, where in Stockholm, they were finding they're having numerous driving incidents of people getting hit by cars. The speed cameras weren't actually stopping people speeding, but somebody came up with the bright idea using gamification theory. Why not put every car that goes through the speed cameras below the speed limit into a lottery and take a share of the money that people are fined? Overnight, incidences on Stockholm's roads dropped by 22%. So it was using games as a way of enticing people to do good things. What we also did is we looked at how we worked with our communities, and I'll talk a bit about the microgrant in a minute or two once I stop the presentation. But we ran a microgrant scheme, and that is really taking behavioural science learning to get this scheme right to the heart of the community. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And the last one was we then produced Game Plan. So Game Plan is the book we wrote with Leeds Beckett. We can provide you with copies of that free of charge. We've got copies we can send out because that's what Sport England have paid us to do. And it uses 4 positions in a process that we've called ready, set, go, and next, and that's using the gamification and the event planning framework to do the work for us. When you read it, a lot of it is things we already do. It's just sequencing them in the right way through the learning that we've been able to develop. So I'll just stop sharing if that's okay. Right, so that was a very quick run through of how we got to where we are. What I'd like to do now, if it's okay, just bring a couple of examples to life, because it'll probably give you a flavour of what we do, because we were being a bit different in our approach. So one of those is the micro grant scheme, and I'll give you, in the UCIs we had 2 examples of this: what we delivered here in Doncaster and what Harrogate delivered. And this is no slight on Harrogate, they just delivered a standard model. What they did is they put an amount of money to one side as a grant programme for the communities. And that grant programme, if I remember rightly, I think they could apply for up to £3,000 to help them run an event. Okay. Our scheme budget for the whole of Doncaster was £3,000 for our grant scheme in total. Maximum you could apply for was 200. Why did we pitch it at that level? What we'd learned from previous events is money scares communities, particularly those communities of inequalities, and bidding for money does that as well. So what we wanted to do was make it as simple as possible from our learning. And the reason why I came to that was, in one of the Tour de Yorkshires, I was speaking to 3 women in a community that the race ran through. It was a really community that had a really hard times and had been flooded twice already. So it had a history of negativity there, and we go into scarcity of mindset about that in a second. So we did a presentation, and these ladies came up to me afterwards and said, oh, we'd really like to bid for some money, but we're not going to do that. And when we got to the nub of it is, they wanted about £60 to run an event. Their disposable income between the 3 of them for a whole month was around about £50. And their fear was, if they didn't deliver the event, they would have to pay that back to us. So for me, this is a prime example of being about place-based, community-based at a very granular level, because the particularly cycle races are great at bringing communities together at sort of large scale, small scale, and very granular. Okay, so that was a process we put in there. If I give you an idea, we had £3,000 on the table for our grant scheme for the 2019 UCIs. We spent on that £2,250, and we engaged over 8,000 people through that programme in communities. And what that tended to be is small groups of people coming together on a street, in a cul-de-sac, or around a venue. And one of the things I talk about is, if you saw on one of those slides, it was brew and a loo. So why call it that? We didn't engage an aging population in the races at all. They didn't come out to watch. But our research told us they wanted to watch, and they watched on TV. And when we got to the nub of it, what they wanted was somewhere to sit down while they're waiting for the race to come by. They wanted a brew, cup of tea, but that then meant they needed a loo. So we fed that back, and we talked about it. And my executive wanted to build fan zones along the route. We couldn't do that because it wasn't cost effective. But what we did do through the micro grant scheme is offer funding up to groups to actually host community groups. So that could be a house. If you open the house up to use your loo and actually make a cup of tea, and they could all sit in the front garden. Extremely successful over all the races we hosted, to the point where Co-op Funeral Parlour was on the route of one race, and they actually opened up the funeral parlour for the race. So they got a grant off us to buy the tea and coffee, to buy some spare chairs to put outside and some parasols. And it cost us about 150 quid, but they had a group of around 60 elderly people in that community sat outside there because they had that access. So it's thinking about doing things differently. But it was a process that enables us to go through this. So what I would say is, when we've hosted these events, what we've tried to do is get really to the nub of what the issues, what stops people coming to watch them. What we've not tried to do is get people physically active from the events. That's really, really difficult to do. Okay. And I would sit here, and I have done in other meetings, and said, large scale events will get an uplifting activity. But what in the contemplation model, I'm not sure if you're aware about that, like pre-contemplation, contemplation, post-contemplation, etc. People who become active after these large events have already made the decision to do it. They just need the nudge to do that. And girls' football is a prime example. The Euros, etc., the Lionesses winning saw a massive upsurge in girls taking part in football. What you generally see when you look through the data and the insight on that, that generally is an increase in those girls that have already made the decision or wish to do it. They just haven't had the, in a combi world, the opportunity. So the opportunities are made available for them. So they have the capability. The opportunity wasn't there, but they have the motivation to do it. We just need to put the opportunity in places, which we did successfully with all the football clubs that were developed. And similarly, if Tracy was on the call, I worked with her when we hosted the Rugby League World Cup because she worked on the social impact program on that, and they were very good at putting that in place. Okay. So, taking us through this process, what else would I say about it? I'd also say that the social value and the social impact of these should not be underestimated, particularly with linear events like this that run through communities. If you get this right, you can have a real powerful impact on theirs that buys capital for the organisations in those communities. So why did we do this here? In Doncaster, when we held the first Tour de Yorkshire, nationally, we weren't in a very good position from a point of view seen as a very good local authority. We were in special measures as a local government at the time, so the government had taken us over and we had to reset people's perceptions of Doncaster. So we use those events as a place tool to reset people's perceptions of Doncaster. We also used it as a tool around resetting people's perceptions locally of Doncaster. So there's a model called scarcity mindset. What scarcity mindset is, and it gets ingrained into communities and people, is that if you live in a community or in a house or somewhere where you've constant pressures around being able to feed the family, heat the house, worry about your job if you're in the gig economy, etc. Your health is poor and you worry about that. The last thing you're going to think about, as we all know, is being physically active or even engaging in a nice event. But what we need to do is to try and enable people to do that. And that's not just a mental state in people's minds. When we worked with Leeds Beckett, we worked with the medical department there. Your brain actually chemically changes permanently. So if you're constantly in that stress situation, your brain and the bit that is pessimistic and always is negative grows bigger, where the happy part of your brain shrinks. Okay. And what we had to do with the events is sell them and promote them in a way. This is an exciting, once in a lifetime thing to do, and you're going to really enjoy it. And by doing that, we were able to, what we call, set a sparkler moment. People came and saw the event, like that old lady saying about the community spirit, was so engaged and empowered about it. It released some of that scarcity mindset and empowered some positive mindset that enabled to do more work around community engagement, community work after that. And we've now got groups which have formulated out of those events that are now long-standing. So the Coventry one is a good example. Prior to us taking the roast through the village, they had a Christmas market, 2 days, that was it. Post that and up to, it's building back up again, but up to the pandemic. So that was in 2016. By the pandemic, they had a Christmas market. They had a music festival that had 3,000 people attending each year. They had a poppy night at the castle where they lit the castle up with poppies, and they had a community arts parade, all by the group that got together to host the Tour de Yorkshire when it came through, and that developed, and we've seen that develop over a number of communities. So for me, why do we run the events? The economic impact is of value, but if I'm being honest, sometimes the economic impact does feel a bit too good to be true when you're given the numbers, but the social value, the social impact, and that capital you buy in those communities is the paramount thing for us. And then off the back of that, once we've got that strong relationship, we can start building a network which actually looks at what is the physical activity interventions we can put into those communities. So we've had very few cycling interventions off our races. What we have been able to do is build up a capacity of movement, i.e. movement in the community around doing good, or movement in what is the physical activities that we want to do, and we spend a lot of time after the event on doing that. And that is one thing that I would reiterate about this, is the two things is start your planning the day you announce. You should be starting your planning before that. The day you actually think about bidding for these events, you should be starting your community planning, your engagement planning. And it doesn't stop a week, 2 weeks after. Actually, this is the start of 3-4 years work, because some of those communities will want you to work with them post that for a lot longer than you anticipate. So be prepared to have a long burn after the event as well. So that's a quick rundown of where we are. The book Game Plans explains that. There is on our website in Doncaster, you can access it online with all the templates and all the articles and things that have helped us design it. But like I said, also, we can actually send hard copies out if that's appreciated. But I'm sure you've got questions and things, which are probably easier for me to talk through things.
Thank you, Andrew. That's fantastic, and there's so much learning in that. I've had a look online at the at your mini website there, which just which presents that. Just before we just go on, I just want to highlight that we've got Natasha Gada here, who's here to talk about social value and the Tour de France Grand Départ. So Natasha will be talking to us about that. Some really interesting learning. I've just got one question for me just before I open it up to everyone else.
Yeah.
Did you get any indications about the return on investment for that really quite modest level of investment that you put on the ground? You know, what does that manifest itself in the short and the longer terms in terms of that activation piece, you know, with communities? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So when I say we're in it for the long game, so those three ladies I spoke about originally in Tolbar, we worked with them to actually make a bid. And in the end, if I remember rightly, we gave them £75. Interesting, the way we do, so I'll just explain the way we do this. One of the things we talk about is sludge. What we need to do is get rid of the things that make it hard to do this. So with a lot of communities like ours in Doncaster, the average reading age is very low. Okay, so the way we put our grant scheme together, the application was one sheet of A4. The A4 on one side said what we wanted to happen with some themes. We then asked just for an explanation of who's going to bid it. You didn't have to be constituted. You didn't have to be a group. You could be an individual who would show goodwill. The reason why it's at £200 is that is the spend on my team's credit card. I can spend without alerting finance. Okay. So how do we designed things to make it awkward for the public in local authority to access. So how do we make it easier? Let's get rid of finance because they'll ask a load of questions. So as long as it was no more than £200, that was fine. That enabled us to do those applications. How do we get the money to them? We don't give them the money. We ask them what they want. And we ordered items off Amazon, even to the point if they wanted tea and coffee, we arranged a day, we go to the local Asda in the community and the groups would come and join us there. No, I'm not joking here. We'd have 3 or 4 people with trolleys walk up and Darren, who's in my team, would be there with the credit card and go, right, that's 40 quid's worth of tea and coffee and milk, pay for that. Next person along, pay for that. Make it as simple as possible. That's how you get to the heart of the communities. How do we know that works? Those 3 ladies went on now to run holiday schemes. So in that community now, every year there's a holiday scheme and they averagely apply out of our half funding and other funding now for a couple of grand every summer now to run a sort of a youth work over 2 weeks in that community. So we've gone from £75 all the way to a couple of grand a year, but a real impact over time with those groups.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really helpful. So Will, up there in Lancaster, what's your credit card limit?
Yeah, I put my hand up. That was music to my ears, Andrew, coming from one local authority officer to another. So, yeah, we've had credit cards taken off as they don't trust us. So, up in Lancaster, spend too much. So, yeah, thank you for the presentation. Really, really interesting. So, my role at Lancaster is I'm the Chief Officer for Environment and Place, and I've been asked to be the strategic lead for all things planning for the tour coming through Lancaster through to the other districts. Now in Lancashire, we currently, obviously pre-OGR, run a 2-tier model. So we've got the county council that ultimately have the legal agreement with the Grand Départ and the Tour de France. And I was really interested to hear your comment there around planning. Plan as early as possible, get going as early as possible. And We're probably finding that a little bit more difficult because, like I said, the legalities lie with the county, not with the district council. It runs through 4 districts. Then you've got all of the town councils, the bid improvement districts, the community groups, everybody filling up my inbox going, when can we talk to you? When can we get going? And all we seem to hear back is, you're not going to hear anything from the Tour de France until the 2026 tour is over. So I suppose the question is, how did you kind of navigate through similar conversations to be able to plan as early as possible? Because at the moment, that feels to be the bit where we're struggling to take the handbrake off in Lancashire.
Okay, so we had 2 examples of that. So for the Tour de Yorkshires, the license was held by Welcome to Yorkshire, so they had all the legal duty and responsibilities. Essentially, the one thing that people got fixated on was the road surface and the road and corners and things like that. Forget about that, because you have very little control over that. They'll tell you what to do. What you need to look at is get yourself ready for the community engagement. So one of the things we did in Doncaster, we got a couple of containers, the big lorry containers, and put them in a council park, park somewhere. And we ordered online 10 kilometres of bunting, because everybody loves a bit of bunting for this. And one of the things we set ready, planning ahead, is we gave people activation packs, and that was 0.5 kilometre of bunting and loads of posters and things like that. We then started collecting loads of bikes from the dump it sites that have been thrown away. So if you've got the Tour de France coming through, everybody's gonna want a yellow bike on their wall, aren't they? So let's make the most of it. So what you do is get your containers ready now, get them there, buy loads of cans of yellow spray paint and loads of yellow bikes. Because what I'll guarantee you, what will happen is your councillors will ask you for bunting and yellow bikes. If you can supply those en masse to them and give them to the community to look after, they'll love you forever. They really will. It's amazing that the capital bunting buys. I tell you, it's better than spending £2 million in some of these communities. So 0.5 kilometre of bunting. The other thing is ask for permission. Okay, so on the UCIs, when we did that, I went out to Austria. I was looking to go out to Austria to research it. And what I found is we were hosting the under-21s and the under-23 women's. And what happened was, I was in this town, beautiful town, and there's all this bleach seating to watch the riders sign on. So you'll know there's a signing on ceremony for the riders, and you probably won't get involved in it. But we were having that in Doncaster for these under-23s. And I'd walked around, and behind the bleach seating was a row of really nice houses, and then there was like the equivalent of a secondary school and a primary school. No kids came to watch it and signing on, and I was sat there thinking, that's a bit of a shame for these riders, because it might be the one time they only race in the world. So what we did in Doncaster, ours ran from a place called the Dome, because that's where we built our cycle circuit. We've got a 3,500 seat sports hall auditorium there. I decided to host the signing on in there. It's not in the rule book with the UCIs. You can't do it. You can't do it. They kept telling me that. So we didn't tell them we're doing it. So when they rocked up and said, where's all the bleach seating? We went, oh, it's in the building there. And I played dumb. That, oh, I didn't know you could do it inside. But what we did it was to flip behaviours. So when you turn up an event with school kids, because this is really exciting for school kids, the teachers take charge, don't they? So you imagine you walk up to our big leisure centre, there's a massive entrance, it takes you into the hall space, row of benches. You know the big VIP passes you get when you go to an accredited event? We had 3,500 of those. So the teacher would walk up to the front of the desk, and this is how your thinking has to work around gamification. The first thing we did, we had a member of staff there who walked the teacher away. And they didn't like it, we walked them away. And then we spoke to the first child and went, oh, you're Bob Smith. Oh, yeah, we've got your pass here. Here's your pass. Put it over their head. They've got that. Oh, by the way, on the back of the pass, when you come with your family, you get a free swim and a free skate. Why did we do that? Because we then were able to track longitudinally how active they were using our leisure centres to see if we increased access to physical activity. So we had 3,500 kids in there screaming their lungs out for all these riders signing on. It's now standard practice for the UCIs to request an indoor venue at locations. They allow it now. They didn't beforehand. So my advice is, where possible, is push the rules, be innovative, and start working with groups. Saying the one thing everyone wants to know exactly the timings of the route. You'll not get those to a set time, but you can engage people by saying, well, we're going to supply you with bikes, we're going to supply you with bunting. So you start setting things in place, even prior to any proper announcements by either. It'll be ASO running the Tour de France on it, so we work closely with them, and they're really interesting to work with. So,
so just while you're on that point, Andrew, I can see that Natasha's got a hand up. Now, what I'm proposing to do, Ian, if I can just ask you to ask your question quickly. So Ian Tierney from Wheels for All, and then Natasha, we're going to go to you, and then we're going to try and wrap everything up, within the hour session to take us through to 1:30. This is an introductory kind of chat, isn't it? And I know you're up for sharing this information, Andrew, both electronically and physically, through a follow-up conversation. That's why we're doing it today. So Ian, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Thank you, Andrew. It was just to say that we've worked really closely with the Leisure Trust team at the Dome, and there's a really good Wheels for All hub, operates every single week. I think the thing that really got that over the line for us was when Dame Sarah Story was in her role as the Active Travel Commissioner, and she really pushed that, cycling should be there for all abilities. And off the back of the legacy of the Tour Yorkshire and everything else, she campaigned for that. And that's a really good service now. That our role in that was to train up the Leisure Trust team, the volunteers, and anyone from the local cycling clubs who wants to volunteer to support the local inclusive cycling hub, which operates at the Dome. And Ed Clancy's carried that on, so that's been really good for us, to really have those people with, I guess, quite a profile, but also with a message that cycling is for everyone. So that's really worked well for us over in Doncaster. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear
Thanks, Ian, for mentioning that, because that's a really important part of community activation, isn't it? And it's good to know that you've got the skills and actually be able to upskill the network to do that engagement piece.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ian. And again, if people want to come back to you, and have a conversation, I know you're well up for that. So thank you. Natasha, thanks for joining us. You're from the social value team, from the Grand Départ Tour de France social value team. Tracy Power heads that team up, but I'm really grateful that you're able to join us today, Natasha, and talk us through it. So over to you. And if you want to address some of the points that Andrew raised through your presentation, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I might be able to hopefully fill some gaps, and we'll try and leave lots of room for us to have a discussion and conversation to hopefully provide a little bit of clarity that might be missing for some colleagues on the call. So just so I can pitch it in the right way, do people want to know about the Tour de France in general, outside of like natural operations, around kind of what the scale of the opportunity is, and then joy, or would you just like to hear about social impact? It just might be helpful to get a steer from you.
I think that wider perspective would be useful, actually. Thank you.
No problem.
And just to introduce the Enjoy brand and what it's actually going to mean, how we're going to connect to that. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem. So lovely to meet everybody. My name is Natasha. I'm the Social Impact Manager for the Grand Départ. And so, as mentioned, we've got Tracy Power, who is our kind of senior responsible officer. So Tracy works on the Grand Départ 1 day a week, and then we've got 3 other officers who work alongside myself full time on the Grand Départ's Social Impact programme. So just to give a little bit of context, I'm sure everybody already knows this, but we've got 2 stages coming to the UK. The men's race is on the screen, and we'll whiz through this and go straight over to the women's. So for the women's, we're going to Leeds to Manchester, Manchester, Sheffield, and then finishing with a time trial in London. And this generally gives you a kind of inkling and an idea into the scale of the opportunity. So within an hour and a half's drive of the route, we're expecting just over 50% of the population, which amounts to about 35 million people. And so, we are really hoping that we can get anywhere between 10 to 12 million spectators roadside, which would be the largest ever free to attend sporting event that has taken place in the UK. And in order to do that, social impact is going to have a huge influence on how we engage people in the sport and get them to the roadside. If we look at kind of the Tour de France in some numbers, it is the 3rd largest event in the world. It is broadcast in 190 countries, 70 of which are live broadcasts, with around 1 billion hours viewed on TV. It has an estimated TV audience of 3.5 billion. And there's various other kind of information about the tour on the screen, but that's just really to present the scale of the opportunity that we have as each individual local authority being presented on an international stage. And if we take the 2027 Grand Départ, there's just some figures on the screen. So, you know, we've got 3 nations, 8 combined authorities. We are going through 36 SSSI sites. We are looking at around 8,000 volunteers in total. 2,000 of these we're expecting to be under the age of 25. We're looking at 12,000 stewards and anywhere between 10 and 12 million spectators on the roadside. So hopefully that just gives a flavour to the size and scale of the opportunity that this Grand Départ presents. Got some kind of figures that look at kind of national headshots. So when the Grand Départ was announced in January, it was kind of reported in over 200 countries. There was live reporting on BBC News, The One Show, ITV News, Look North, Cymru Wales, STV, and then various follow-ups on all of the major news channels. And then if we look at the FEM announcement that occurred in April, there was live broadcasts across ITV, BBC, ITV London, BBC London, Channel 4 and Channel 5, with it regularly being referred to as a landmark moment and a real global spotlight. And you can see some global articles on the screen. So it's just really to take a step back and think about what the opportunity is, and grateful for everybody in this group joining and already starting to think about that. And hopefully as we move forward, all we'll be able to do as a Grand Départ team is mobilise people with enough information needed so that everybody feels that they can make the most of the opportunity for your own regions. If we go over to social impact now, so Joy is the brand for the social impact programme. The social impact programme can be kind of summarised on the screen. So we've got 3 core missions, which look at tackling inactivity and improving mental wellbeing, making Britain more productive and prosperous, and supporting communities to thrive. And you can see the problem statements that these were derived from on the screen. And the overall kind of outcomes that we're hoping to achieve from this is having a greater proportion of children building a lifelong relationship with physical activity, improved employment outcomes for young people across the board, with a focus on young people that are not in education, training or employment, but absolutely by no means exclusive to. Improved wellbeing, community cohesion, civic pride. It's all about that kind of pride in place and also a connection to the sport. Greater spectator numbers, broadcast and kind of general engagement with both of the races, and also stronger trade and diplomatic relations between the UK and France, and the UK really seen as a global leader in hosting mega events internationally. To do that, we have 6 programmes that are being delivered across England, Scotland and Wales, and we are working with all of our local authorities around the rollout of these. So I'll give a high-level overview of what each of these are and what they mean to each area and local authority, so you can kind of see how they're delivered in practice, and then we'll absolutely stop talking and open up for questions. So our employability programme is really looking at embedding skills and workforce opportunity for 18 to 25-year-olds throughout every single element of our delivery operation. Secondary to that, we know that a lot of the ways to work on the tour are 1 day unpaid through volunteering. So we've developed a readiness to work programme, which will allow young volunteers to be trained in some employability skills and receive mentoring in one of 5 different sectors. The schools programme is really looking at how can we get ourselves into households the academic year before the race. So launching in September of this year, we have 3 different offerings. For kind of early years, it's looking at physical activity kind of activities. We will then be teaching kind of core curriculum-based subjects across primary schools through the length of the bike, through a variety of different subjects, including art, English, maths, science, geography, those kinds of things. And then we have a Tour de France business simulation challenge for secondary school students, which is designed to be completed with students kind of 14 to 16 and a local employer. Again, this is very much adaptable. It is designing your own Tour de France. And so anyone that does any engagement with young people within that age group is absolutely more than welcome to be delivering that challenge. We have a girls participation programme which teaches girls how to ride a bike. This is aimed at girls between the ages of 8 and 11, and it is a 12-week programme, but we are flexible in terms of how that is delivered to suit the needs of each community. We have an arts and culture programme which will have a kind of golden Tour de France theme across each of the nations and all the local authorities, but very much so leaving room for each local authority to reflect art and culture and their own region in a way that suits them. There'll be some program guidance available so that everyone can ensure that we're all contributing to one shared vision, but very much with a lot of flexibility to kind of demonstrate and impact that in the way that you want to. And we've seen the great work that came out of Sheffield in 2014, so very much hoping to build some guidance to support everybody engaged in a similar way. A community engagement toolkit will be kind of the last one to launch, and this is an online digital platform for people to go on and download how-to guides in order to really engage in Tour de France activity and bring the race to their region in a way that suits them. It very much so, to be fair, models the kind of stuff that you were talking about before, Andrew, around the kind of small grant schemes where people will be able to engage in activity and kind of do that community engagement, I guess. And there's lots of opportunities for different organisations to get involved in designing and delivering things that get uploaded onto that. And then finally, a soft power trade and diplomacy programme, which is really being led by UK Sport and our 3 governments, really looking at how can we make the most of this opportunity 18 months in advance. So that's the programme. Happy to leave. I appreciate that's a lot of information, so happy to leave this screen up for a minute whilst people digest, but just wanted to open the floor to any questions, really.
Thank you, Natasha, for sharing that. Can I just confirm, is that something that you'll be able to share with us as a written proof? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I just need to ask you, that community engagement toolkit, as you can imagine, that's going to be a major focus. You mentioned that will be a little bit later on in the timeline. Can you give us some indication as to when that might be?
Yeah, so we're hoping that it will launch probably February, March of 2027. There's going to be a lot of time that's going to be needed to actually build those guides, and we're actually releasing that as a volunteer activity in this year in order to help get people to contribute, build those guides that will then be uploaded onto the system and launched next year. We're also exploring what the opportunities are for small and micro grants, but still very much in those conversations at the moment. But we're hoping to unlock something so that people can actually apply for some funding to do activity. I can't confirm any of it yet because we're very much so trying to get that over the line at the moment.
Thank you. And just before I open for questions, I just want to make the group aware that Claire Coop from Lancashire County Council, who's the Director of Communities and Engagement, she's been there's a working group at a county level in Lancashire that's working on coordinating this event, and as was said by Andrew earlier on, the bulk of it is about tarmac at this moment in time, but I know that Claire's keen to have conversations with other partners around that engagement piece, and so they are looking to arrange that meeting. They've not had a first meeting yet, but she's the lead officer, and when we hear further information, we will connect you across just so that you're aware of that. So, colleagues on the call, are there any questions for Natasha, just to get things going? Can I just ask about the yellow bike kind of scenario and the use of bikes to actually is that likely to be a feature? I know you're not going to be able to confirm that.
There's been lots of ideas around paint the UK yellow and what that looks like and how we do that, and is that something that gets put in kind of program guidances. So we brought on some creative consultants called Pinwheel who are designing what that arts and culture program looks like at the moment. We are currently collecting seed funding because we'll be applying for some significant funds from some large funding bodies in order to deliver an arts and culture campaign across the 3 nations. So whether it's embedded into there or actually is embedded into some of that community engagement activity so that everybody can participate in one shared vision, we think that's probably the better approach. So yes, just how that information will be disseminated yet, still TBC.
Yeah, but it does sound like you are coordinating conversations at a national level with a view to some of that rolling down to regional and local.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Natasha. Just interested to know the initiatives there that you mentioned, are they all leading up to the Tour de France? Is it during, or how much is actually beyond as part of Legacy?
Yeah, good question. So how the kind of Joy programme is being disseminated is we have developed a framework at a national level, very much so in consultation with all of our local authorities. What we're doing now is working with each local authority to identify exactly what each local authority wants to prioritise, and we'll create some individual delivery plans for those local authorities to make sure that this aligns to that long-term impact plan that each local authority is creating. A lot of the work that we've been doing as a national team is trying to take on a lot of the costs and a lot of the delivery and organisation centrally, because we appreciate that everybody is quite strapped across the UK, to be honest, for time. And so we're embedding the programmes into existing infrastructure where we can, and making sure that there is a baseline offer for every single local authority across the 6 programmes at no additional cost or resource. It's more so utilising the abilities of each local authority, be that the connections between school departments and employers, or disseminating information that we need at that kind of baseline level. And then wherever a local authority wants to expand on that commitment to a particular pillar, we'll then work with them to look at what that could look like. I'm not sure if that answers your question, sorry, but hopefully it does.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more. There's obviously a women's events, and you've focused very much on engaging girls, haven't you, as well? Is that an activation piece? Is it just about getting young women active on bikes, or is there a performance element to it as well?
What do you mean by performance? Do you mean like into the competition and into the sport? Yeah,
Exactly. I just
okay.
wanted to be clear about those pathways,
Sure.
that
Yeah,
you're trying to
totally.
develop locally.
Yeah, absolutely. So British Cycling internally are already pulling together what the approach is going to be for clubs and entry into clubs. We're also going through a major modernisation of the sport phase at the moment, including modernising our competition structure. So by the time 2027 comes, there'll be really, really clear signposts to this is where your local club is, this is where you can get training, this is where you can enter the competition. From a girls' participation element as part of the Joy programme, there was consultation with our funding group kind of when the Grand Départ was first discussed, and we'd received a bid in terms of what everybody wants to achieve from the race coming through. And a core focus of that was girls' participation, which is why it's been brought into the kind of social impact programme. But independently of that, from a participation and growing the sport angle, British Cycling are doing a lot of work to kind of be prepared and ready for when that time comes, and hopefully should have an outline by September.
That's really helpful to know, because I think one thing we could do is work more effectively to collaborate with our clubs to start to build that capacity, that awareness. And I know, Ian, you've got real interest, obviously, through your charity work in inclusive cycling again. So that's another angle that we can look to build our capability locally, ahead of any announcements that you're going to make. Yeah. Okay. So there's a question in the chat from Mark Beveridge from Ribble Valley about a joint working initiative with Arts England, Arts Council on the cultural offer. I presume that you work with ACE on this.
We've spoken to ACE, yes. How we work together and what happened. We are very much so in the kind of start of those conversations. At the moment, we have pulled together the kind of proposal, and we'll be applying for funding. What we need to do in order to apply for significant funding is to develop our seed funding part, and then outline exactly what we're doing and what aligns to the strategic priorities of each funder, and make sure we're applying for the right amount of funding from the right funders in the right location. So we're just doing that mapping work at the moment.
Thank you. And can I ask as well, Natasha, you referenced a few, I'll call them opportunities, and you've recently gone out to the market, haven't you, for your young persons program, as
Yes.
part of the skills and employability work. Can you just advise us in future, how are those opportunities going to be presented? Is there a route, anything that people should just be aware of?
I mean, like any procurement opportunities are directly on the Latour DB LinkedIn, so the best place would be to kind of go there. For social impact, I don't envision us having any large scale procurement opportunities after employability. There will be lots of there's going to be lots of opportunities to work across Joy, and this will be done directly with the local authority. So the local authority will, once they've identified a delivery plan, will work with local organisations in that area to kind of deliver the project.
That's great, thank you. So, colleagues on the call, any more questions for Andrew with game plan and the work over there in Doncaster, or for Natasha in terms of those next steps in terms of the Grand Départ? Well, I can certainly say from our point of view as Active Lancashire, we're very keen to work with you all around our active cycles model and bring that to places along the route. I know we're in conversation with Will and Christian up in Lancaster. We hope to get that on the ground. And similarly, so I know that Paul and Cheryl, when you had the pop-up shop in Burnley, that worked well for you. And you've got the... I hope I'm not speaking out of turn now, but you've got the Tour de Britain, haven't you, coming later this year? It's a fingers crossed moment, is it, right, from both of you? Right, okay, well, fingers crossed for you. And I believe as well that we might have the women's Tour of Britain as well coming to Lancashire, particularly to East Lancashire as well. So there are definitely opportunities for us to up our game, take some of this learning from Andrew and Natasha, and actually integrate that into our events approach, really, where we're building that capability within our communities. Okay. Right, colleagues. If there are no further questions, I think Natasha, Andrew, thanks for. I feel like things have stalled. Everybody seemed to have real enthusiasm earlier on. But thanks for sharing your headlines. Andrew, you've indicated you're happy for people to come back to you.
Yep.
Natasha, equally, yeah. If we can pick that up, I think that would be really, really helpful. We'll circulate those presentations around. I think it is helpful to actually hear you talking through them as well. So the videos will be available if you need to replay them to your members or your teams or whatever, just to get a handle on it. And hopefully we'll pick this up later on in the year when things are starting to develop a little bit further and we're getting some more traction on those partnerships at a national level and how they're rolling down for Lancashire. So that would be great. But thanks for joining us, and we will circulate that information, and any further information that we get from Claire Coop, who's leading the engagement piece from the Grand Départ Tour de France for Lancashire, we'll be in touch and let you know.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Andrew.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Natasha. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.